Back in 1979, an entire nation was basically turned on its head. Now, the Iranian Revolution wasn't just some local event. It sent shockwaves across the globe that, honestly, we still feel today. So in this explainer, we're going to break down exactly how it all went down.
You know, there's this old saying about how authoritarian regimes fall, first gradually and then suddenly. And that, right there, perfectly describes how a monarchy that lasted for 2,500 years was completely toppled in just a matter of months.
When you really get down to it, the heart of this revolution is a clash between two incredibly powerful men, fierce antagonists on a collision course for the very soul of a nation. Let's dig into their stories.
To really understand the revolution, you have to understand the rivals. And their lives, well, they began in completely different worlds. It's kind of amazing, actually.
So on one side, you've got the Shah. He was raised in the imposing shadow of his father, groomed from birth for a throne he would inherit when he was just 21. And on the other side, you have Khomeini, who grew up fatherless and with this really deep personal sense of injustice because he believed the state had actually protected his father's killer. And their educations? Well, they just pushed them even further apart. The Shah was shipped off to this elite Swiss boarding school, totally molded by Western ideas. Khomeini, meanwhile, this dove headfirst into Islamic scholarship, and that defined his entire worldview.
This quote really it nails the core of their differences, doesn't it? The Shah was often seen as this reluctant king. Power was basically thrust upon him. But Khomeini was the absolute opposite. He spent his entire life, step by step, working to seize it for himself.
So, you have these two men on completely opposing paths. It was only a matter of time before they collided. And that moment? It came in the 1960s, when the Shah unveiled this grand plan for Iran that would bring him into a direct public conflict with Khomeini for the very first time.
He called it the White Revolution, and the white part was key. It was supposed to be this bloodless transformation, a way to catapult Iran into the modern world. His goal was incredibly ambitious: make Iran a global power, and do it within a single generation. And listen, on paper, if you just look at this list, these reforms look incredibly progressive, right? He ended a feudal system that had been around for centuries, gave land to poor families, gave women the right to vote, and pushed for education. But not everyone saw it that way.
Yeah, for Khomeini, this wasn't progress. This was a direct assault on Islamic principles. And he just exploded out of his quiet life of study, openly challenging the Shah with this just stunningly defiant message. His audacity was electric, and with that, the battle lines were officially drawn.
So, the Shah's response to this open defiance was to push back, and push back hard. This led to Khomeini's arrest and eventually his exile. But, as we're about to see, this move only made the Ayatollah an even more powerful symbol of resistance. It totally backfired.
The Shah's playbook was pretty clear. On one hand, you had the brutal force of his secret service, SAVAK, and on the other, these just incredibly lavish spectacles, like a massive party out in the desert for foreign leaders, all designed to project this image of absolute power. But all it did was create this huge disconnect with his own people. And this all created a full-blown information war. The opposition was claiming there were hundreds of thousands of political prisoners to get international support. Now, that number was a huge exaggeration. But the reality of the Shah's secret police, their torture methods, the executions, was brutal and absolutely undeniable. So here's the real irony. Khomeini is physically isolated, right? For 14 years in Iraq, he barely even left his neighborhood, but his influence just grew and grew. His lectures and ideas were smuggled into Iran on cassette tapes, passed from hand to hand. He literally became a legend in his own absence, this distant, incorruptible symbol of defiance.
Okay, let's fast forward to 1978. The whole situation was a powder keg. The country was modernizing so fast it was creating all this social tension. All it needed was a spark, and that spark was a defamatory newspaper article published against Khomeini. That's what lit the fuse.
And once it started, things moved with just breathtaking speed. Every tragedy, like that horrifying cinema fire or the Black Friday massacre, it just fueled bigger and bigger protests. Eventually, the whole country was paralyzed by strikes, and the Shah's authority just evaporated.
So, the Shah, who was secretly battling cancer and was visibly weakened, he finally tried to concede. He gets on TV, makes this appeal, but it was way too little and it was far too late. He came across as desperate,
And the people, they didn't see a concession, they saw a final definitive sign of his weakness.
And here's the amazing contrast. While the Shah is faltering, Khomeini is masterfully using the global stage. He's forced out of Iraq and lands in a suburb of Paris, and suddenly he's this international media sensation. He gave over 100 interviews, carefully hiding his radical vision. He presented himself as a champion of democracy, and it perfectly set the stage for his triumphant return.
And then the moment comes. February 1st, 1979. Khomeini's plane lands in Tehran, and millions of people are there to cheer him on. Just like that, the 2,500-year-old monarchy was finished. A new era for Iran and for the entire world had begun.
So, what happened to our two main characters? Well, the Shah would never see Iran again. He died just over a year after he fled. Khomeini, on the other hand, got to implement his lifelong vision of an Islamic republic, a theocracy ruled by clerics, that, as we know, endures to this day.
When you boil it all down, the whole story really does come down to this simple idea, a confrontation of two opposing wills. And in this clash, Khomeini's unwavering, lifelong desire to seize power proved to be far, far stronger than the Shah's will to keep it.
And that really raises a timeless question about the nature of power itself, doesn't it? It's a conflict that didn't just define the past, but it leaves this legacy that continues to shape our world today.